In this video, I'm going to be sharing the strategies that I use to help people find the source of their emotional hunger, as well as tips on how they can actually manage this without using sugar or any other processed foods to deal with it. To give you an idea what I mean by emotional eating, which a lot of people also call stress eating because they're uncomfortable using the word emotional eating, the truth is that many of us experience it and aren't even aware of it. At one time in my life, when I was first starting out my cooking school, I had no idea what I was doing. I felt so insecure. I actually felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed that I quit a full-time job and wasn't supporting my husband to pay the mortgage and all the bills in the way. And I had this vision for myself and I didn't know how to execute it. And I would start off the morning thinking, oh, what am I going to do? So I'd make some phone calls, totally awkward, embarrassing phone calls where people on the other end were going, does this person know what they're doing? And I didn't. And so I'd feel really embarrassed and ashamed. So what I thought I'd do is go to something that I was good at and comfortable doing. And because I was starting a cooking school, it made perfect sense in my mind to make a chocolate cake. And so what I would do is I would make the chocolate cake and I would eat a fair bit of the batter during the making of the cake. And then I'd pop the cake into the oven. And then I'd go back to my desk and I'd experience awkwardness and confusion and frustration and not knowing what I was meant to be doing. And I would find my way going through the kitchen once the cake was done to just having a little slice of it. Then I'd go back to my desk, feel awkward, try and work, had no idea what I was doing, and then I'd just have a little bit of chocolate cake with my lunch or morning tea. Or when I was actually icing it, I'd take the top off and eat the top of it and then ice it, and I'd have some of the icing. And by the end of the day, 3/4 of the cake was gone, and my husband was due to come home at that time, and I was embarrassed thinking, I've eaten 3/4 of a cake, and now I can't get rid of the last quarter of it by hiding it in the freezer or giving it to a neighbor because they're going to find out about it and then come over and say, oh, thanks for the cake. And my husband's going to go, what cake? And then I would have to explain that I'd eaten 3/4 of a cake. And so there was a lot of embarrassment and shame, but essentially what I was doing is I was feeling very frustrated, ashamed, and confused, and had all these feelings that I was really uncomfortable with. So what I did was I just would push them down with the chocolate cake. And I often ask people, where in your life might you be chocolate caking it? And it's really a metaphor for stress eating or emotional eating or not dealing with the things that make us uncomfortable and pushing it down with sugar and food that make us feel good in the short term. Emotional eating is something that impacts all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. And it actually stems from childhood, where we're taught from a very early age to use food as a tool for making us feel comfortable. So what do parents do when their children are feeling discomfort? They offer food as a remedy. From the get-go in life, we are taught to use food as a way of dealing with our emotions. This tendency to use food as both reward and pacifier can stay with us throughout our whole lives and become an ingrained habit. And while learned behaviors aren't inherently bad, left unchecked, they can take over your entire life. Most people assume that emotional eating is only associated with negative feelings like fear, stress, anxiety, frustration. We're all aware of the cliche of the woman after a breakup sitting on the couch watching Bridget Jones' Diary, crying while she's eating her pints of ice cream. In fact, many of us can probably relate to that. In fact, I used to measure the severity of my romantic breakups by how many pints of ice cream I would eat. So if it wasn't too bad, it was a 2-pinter. But if it was really bad and I was devastated, it could be a 7 or 8-pinter. But we don't just use sugar as a tool to deal with negative emotions. Because we've learned how to use sugar as a tool for emotional management, our brains can justify having sugar for any emotion. Maybe you've had a great day at work and you want to come home and celebrate with some pizza and ice cream. Or it could be that you're feeling a little nostalgic and you want to revisit those lovely feelings you had as a child and you see the Twinkie as the way of doing it. We can basically use sugar as a way to actually create fun, joy, and positivity in our life. No matter what emotion you're experiencing, using food as a crutch to deal with your emotions can quickly turn into a familiar cycle. The cycle begins with an emotional trigger. Big or small, positive or negative, it doesn't matter. What matters is that your emotions have been sparked and you're now looking for a way to process these feelings. Because you've had a lifetime of associating food with either reward or comfort, you start getting excited about that ice cream store on the way home, or maybe the frozen pizza that can be reheated up. Or how about that secret stash of cookies in that drawer? As you start to picture the thing that you're about to eat, your brain starts to create a strong craving. You may even start salivating. And what happens now is that you've forgotten all about the emotion that originally triggered you, and you're now focused on that treat that you're about to have. So you finally get your hands on that thing that you've been craving all day, you're enjoying it, and that emotional itch has been scratched for now. So after you've come out of the other side of your binge, what happens is the sugar rush wears off, you start to get a dip in your energy, and what you're going to start to experience is a wave of negative feelings. A feeling of guilt, frustration at your lack of self-control, and an overwhelming feeling of helplessness can reappear. You may even start to experience anxiety and a fear that you may never be able to stop this pattern of behavior. So now that wonderful feeling you had while you were eating that treat is completely gone, and you spent way more time beating yourself up for giving in to your cravings, and on top of that, your body feels terrible. What are you going to do to make yourself feel better? You guessed it, and that is the cycle of emotional eating. Now that we've covered what emotional eating actually means, I want to dive into the sticky relationship between emotional hunger and physical hunger. I think you'll be surprised by how often we are guided by our emotional hunger rather than our body's natural cries for food. So what do I mean when I talk about physical hunger? To be quite honest, most people in first world countries have never experienced what truly is physical hunger. Our bodies are amazing, and they're actually capable of going weeks without food. And in fact, in almost every place on earth, cultures practice some form of fasting in one way or another. And I personally have actually done a 30-day water fast, for the only thing I had for 30 days was water. And what I learned about that was really illuminating, that anywhere from 7 to 30 days without food can show you just how crystal clear it is that most of us eat for emotional reasons, and certainly for habitual hunger reasons rather than true physical hunger. Physical hunger is where your body needs food. And when you are truly hungry, what you'll find is that you're grateful for anything, where a piece of broccoli or a salad can end up looking like an ice cream sundae. Emotional hunger is so much more familiar to us, and especially because we so often confuse it for physical hunger. When you're eating emotionally, you're actually seeking a certain type of food. And when you're hungry, your body will be content with real food. Have you ever had that experience where you're like, I'm hungry, you open up the fridge door, but there's like nothing to eat, even though it's full of food? It's just the foods in the fridge aren't the addictive ones that elicit that emotional kind of pleasure response. And so we kind of go, meh. So a really good example that most of us are familiar with is, remember when you were a kid and you looked into the fridge, you said, Mom, I'm hungry. And she said, oh, cool, have an apple. And you're like, no, that's not what I want. And this is because your body's craving the feeling that the sugary or the processed food is actually eliciting from your body, not because you're experiencing true hunger. These mind games pop up everywhere. Have you ever experienced this? You're like, I'm going to make a big batch of cookies for the family, and that'll last a whole week. And then you find that not only you are dipping into it faster than you could ever imagine, but they're literally gone within a day or two. When it comes to addictive foods, trust me, the mind can justify anything. So now, how do you start healing this lifetime habit of emotional eating? First, you must fully understand the problem. And at Sweet Freedom, we have a number of strategies that we use, but I'm going to share with you 2 key strategies. The first strategy that I teach my Sweet Freedom fighters is mindful eating. As we mentioned in previous videos, emotional eating goes hand in hand with mindless consumption. You're not really thinking or present to what you're eating. Basically, your brain's on autopilot. The first thing that you need to do in this process is just to become aware. And although this sounds deceptively simple, something as simple as meditation or taking 3 deep breaths can actually go a long way to stopping that emotional addictive behavior right in its tracks. In the Sweet Freedom online program, we give you a whole host, an arsenal of non-food tools. So these are things that help you process your emotions and deal with the cravings and the addictions before they actually take over without using food. And I have to say, the number one tool that we use, and don't groan when I tell you this because it's super effective, it's journaling. The powerful thing about journaling, which most of us underestimate, is it starts to bring what is in out. So we often are controlled by thoughts and feelings and subconscious things that are just kind of jumbled around, and we're not even aware of what's actually driving our behaviors. What journaling starts to do is it starts to bring that out so we can become aware, because awareness is the first step in the process of actually sorting out emotional and stress eating. This can be a hugely healing and revealing process because you're going to start to recognize your triggers, and it's also going to reveal patterns in your eating behaviors. You can even start to forgive yourself. Super important part in this process, and it can be hard, is to not judge yourself. Because in judging yourself, you're only going to actually make yourself feel worse and perpetuate the negative cycle you're trying to stop. In all of my programs and work, I have a strict no judgment policy, and this includes not judging yourself. What I want you to do is to actually switch the judgment with forgiveness. So forgive yourself for all the binge eating or the mindless eating, for the bad thoughts you actually think about yourself, and forgiving yourself for falling into this cycle. The main thing I want you to take away from this video is to start to understand why you're eating the way you do and why you actually make the food choices you're making. Using the tools I've laid out, I want you to take a step back and really start to observe the signals your body's actually giving you to distinguish between emotional hunger and physical hunger. And trust me, everyone will be different. You have to go on your own unique journey to discover what it is that truly works for you. And remember, at Sweet Freedom, it's all about progress, not perfection. Spending the next week meditating, journaling, and breathing, and discovering why you're eating the foods that you're eating is going to be way more powerful than spending the next week on any restrictive diet where you're counting calories, weighing your food, and trying to get through it by relying on willpower alone. Okay, so the tools that I've laid out are going to be super useful for you getting started on your journey, but they're just a small part of the Sweet Freedom method. The real problem with staying off of sugar in the long term is that we are living in a society surrounded by sugar. Temptation is all around us. I mean, the most places you go, everywhere there's junk food, fast food, processed food, and sugar. It's super hard to avoid. Over 75% of foods in supermarkets have some form of sugar in them, and even the ones that are labeled as healthy. We're constantly surrounded by messages to eat sugar and processed food, and it's done by powerful companies, corporations that have billions of dollars to influence you to eat sugar, and it's everywhere. It's on the internet, it's on your phone, it's on billboards, it's in the supermarket aisle. In fact, you can go to places where you're not even meant to have anything to do with sugar, like the doctor's office, and there you'll find sugar. I mean, I've seen Instagram accounts where they're literally, the whole feed is drizzling chocolate slowly over different types of food. Even our society uses sugar as a way to show love and attention. I mean, you can have the best of intentions wanting to give someone a sugary treat to make them feel better, but the end result can actually be more harmful than loving. Even when you have the best of intentions to try and give up sugar, it can seem like society and everyone around you is working against you. Staying sugar-free in a sugar-filled world can be incredibly difficult, which is why in the next video, I'm going to be sharing with you my #1 strategy for helping people live the Sweet Freedom lifestyle long-term. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if you never had to diet again? No weighing or measuring, no feeling bad about your food choices, being able to walk past the things that used to tempt you without actually feeling anything? Wouldn't it feel wonderful to wake up with tons of energy consistently and feel happy and grateful every day instead of anxious, frustrated, or hopeless? The strategy I'm going to share with you in the next video is the #1 strategy that 12-step addiction recovery programs give credit to being their number one thing that helps people overcome addiction. And now what I'd love you to do is to comment below. Let me know about your journey. How are you going with meditation and emotional eating? I really know that when you share what's going on for you, other people are strengthened by it. I'm inspired by it. So I'd love to hear how this journey is actually going for you. So if you're looking for real, long-term, and sustainable change to heal your relationship with food, I'll see you in the next video.